All right, welcome into a special edition of the 2022 MLB Draft Show. I'm really excited about this one. This is something that we've never done at Prospects Live. This is something that we've never really done as an industry that I've seen. So I'm excited to get a lot of industry leaders, industry voices in one space. Joining me tonight, we've got Vinny Servino, the national supervisor over at Perfect Game. We got Carlos Collazo, the draft lead, the draft editor, the big man on campus in terms of draft content over at Baseball America. And then we've got Jim Callis as well. He's kind of the greatest of all time, if you will, the GOAT, coming in from MLB.com. So, fellas, welcome into the show. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Too kind of the description, but yeah, glad to be here. Glad everybody's doing well.
Exactly.
Jim, you're gonna own that for a long time.
I was gonna say, like the GOAT said, I'm excited to be here too, man. Grateful for having
Yeah,
us.
good to have you guys. Good to have you guys. Well, I want to just kind of start this thing off talking about your guys' fall, talking about summer, going into winter. I know it slows down a little bit here for the next, 4 to 6 weeks before college ball starts, but what did your guys' last 3 or 4 months look like? How much time you spending at the ball fields? How much time you talking to, industry leaders, people in organizations? Kind of spitball a little bit. Where you guys been?
Well, I guess I can jump into this one first just because mine might be a little bit different, although Jim is certainly familiar with what my schedule has been like recently. For us, kind of in the fall heading into December, it's really prospect handbook season. So the draft for me gets put a little bit on the back burner, which is always disappointing because I really love the draft. I like getting deep into that. But for us, I'd say the last two and a half, and for some people on staff, last 3 months has really been all about the prospect handbook. We've been trying to fill that out, get all of our information, get edited. We actually just sent it this past Friday. So a couple of days ago, we just finished that book. So it's nice on staff to have that behind us. But for me, typically we'll have a ranking kind of in the current year draft class prior to the summer. That's basically top 50s on high school, college. And then we typically try to update that at the end of the summer heading into the fall. It's kind of like big picture schedule for me in terms of the draft board.
Yeah. What about you, Vinny?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Vinny.
Yeah, it's a little bit similar to Carlos in that when we get into November, December, obviously there's not a lot of baseball going on. All of the college falls have wrapped up for the most part, and certainly the summer circuit's over with pretty much immediately following Jupiter. Obviously, there's a little scalp ball stuff here and there, but so we kind of, what we do on our end is we kind of focus in the list season. Like we're starting to get our lists together. We have kind of names in a board format, and we try to rank and organize them there based on just updated dope looks that we've had, that sort of stuff. The summer is obviously a little bit different, and it's different for the draft prospects too. You're kind of on a big circuit, and it is a long time. You're a lot of days on the road, but the fall, there's the big ones, the keynote events, so to speak. And then heading into the winter, we're kind of just organizing our guys, kind of what rounds, what groupings we have based on talking to scouts and what we've seen.
Yeah, I was going to say, when Carl's talking about the prospect handbook, I still have a love-hate relationship with the prospect handbook, Carlos. I took a lot of pride in, I think I did 13 of them maybe when I was there.
Yeah.
But man, I don't miss the book. Like that book just killed me in the fall. I can't imagine having to do it again. So my hat's off to you guys for cranking that out. I mean, for us at MLB.com, I don't think we're quite back to where we were travel-wise before the pandemic, and now with Omicron going, who knows when we'll get back to that level. But it was, I did get to call the high school All-American game, or I don't even know what we called the event, the high school futures game, whatever it was at the All-Star game. Was a lot of fun. I got to say, almost all the best players in the high school side were there. Outside of that, travel-wise, I went to Arizona Fall League, which isn't draft-related in the fall, and it was funny. One thing I'd forgotten. So we usually pick up the draft when we're done with Arizona Fall League. And a couple years ago, I guess it would have been 2019, when they moved the Fall League schedule earlier, we decided, okay, well, let's do 100 guys in the fall instead of 50. We used to just do a top 50. We did not remember, at least I did not, that we did 100 on the old Fall League schedule. And this year, because of the pandemic, the Fall League was back to its previous schedule, and we still did 100. So it was, I felt like we were scurrying a little bit to do, because in the past we would have just done 50. But, we spent, I feel like I spent most of November just talking to a bunch of area scouts and watching a bunch of video and cross checkers and scouting directors. And I know, Vinny, I don't know if you have access to it now, but I know Baseball America does. I mean, we have access to Synergy we've had for the last year. And I'm like, it's weird. Like after a year, I can't imagine not having Synergy. Like
100%.
Seriously,
how,
man.
like, I mean, how did we, like, I mean, look, it would be ridiculous if we had like exit velocities and spin rates and that stuff on there, but just being able to look at video of just about anyone and get velocities or see how hitters performed against certain pitches, certain velocities is pretty cool too. So I feel like that was pretty nonstop, like for most of November and the early part of December. It's good to have the list out. And then our schedule's so different than what I was used to at Baseball America for so many years, where Carlos and his guys, they've done all the handbook and their top 30s, and then the college season starting, and they'll get into the draft, and we're the exact opposite. We do the draft, and now we'll jump into top 100 and top 30s, and we'll revisit the draft after spring training. So I've gotten used to it finally. I guess I've been through this for about 9 cycles at MLB.com, but there are still times where it's like, it feels like, man, it's February. Why am I not doing draft stuff right now?
9 cycles and you're still scarred by the Baseball America handbook.
I've only been through 5, Jim. So
congrats on the handbook, by the way, Carlos. That's awesome, man.
No, thank you.
But Jim, actually, I think Jim brings up a really good point. I think probably the most revolutionary change kind of in draft coverage since the COVID-19 pandemic has started has been the kind of emergence of Synergy and access to remote video and data. I think that's been huge, and not only from people on our side of things who are covering the draft from the outside, but I think teams and front offices and even area scouts a ton of video is now accessible to them and to everybody else, and it makes kind of evaluating almost a whole different game.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I talk with probably just as many analysts inside scouting organizations as I do area scouts, because there's 2 sides of the coin now. I mean, Synergy and some of the other tools out there just to, I guess, really truly qualify a player if you can't actually see them yourself has been, revolutionary is a good word for it. All right, so I wanted to kind of play off a little bit of Jim's time calling the futures game. I was wondering, is there a guy at the top of any of your guys' boards that really stands out right now as maybe a personal favorite, someone that you might expect to surge here as we move into the spring?
You mean who's not already at the top? Or
maybe anybody who's not named Elijah Green that you expect to surge to the top of your board.
If that's the qualifier, I'll take Termarr Johnson if that's the only qualifier.
There you go. Okay, maybe someone.
Which of the 3 prep bats do you want?
Maybe someone outside of the top 5.
I was going to say, we have Drew Jones and Termarr ahead of Elijah. I mean,
yeah.
Well, I was going to say, like, the guy who I think, well, if you're saying outside the top 5, to me, the guy who I'm just enchanted with that I think could vault his way into that number 1 pick discussion, I really like Chase DeLauder at James Madison. I mean, obviously, had a big summer in the Cape. He didn't get to play a lot at James Madison because he only played a half season, and he had a great half season in the spring, but it wasn't a full season. So he didn't show up on any of the NCAA leaderboards, and he went to the Cape and led the Cape in home runs and slugging, but he's not just a power guy. I mean, it could be 55 or better tools across the board. He's 6'4", 235. I think he's got one of the best approaches in college baseball of the top guys. So I think if he goes out and does that, I could see him insinuating himself into that discussion, because not that they're locked in, but the Orioles have the number 1 pick, and as tantalizing as Termarr Johnson and Drew Jones and Elijah Green are, who are 3 of the best high school position players come around in a while, the Orioles have gone college player, all bats, like under Mike Elias since he's been there. And I could really see Chase DeLauder, who, has a great strikeout to walk ratio, in addition to all these statistical attributes and great tools, really being a guy who might be attractive to the Orioles.
Yeah, I agree. I really quickly, just on the Mike Elias thing in the Baltimore Orioles, my mind keeps circling back to 2012, I believe, when Elias had his shot at getting his high school anchor in Carlos Correa with the Astros. And I just wonder whether or not this loaded of a high school class, especially at the top, they kind of changed their way and splurged a little bit on just someone with superstar potential. But I mean, you make great points.
No, and I think you're right on the Orioles. I mean, I don't think they're locked in because
Mhm.
I could see them. I mean, look, Termarr Johnson might be as good a high school hitter as I can remember, just in terms of pure hitting ability. That's going to be attractive to the Orioles. Like, I'd be, as of today, maybe a little surprised. I don't know about you guys, if the Orioles took Elijah Green just with the swing and miss, even though he's probably got the highest ceiling. But if you told me the Orioles, like today, we're going to take Termarr Johnson next July, I could totally see that because I mean, I think he's that pure hitter
Mhm.
that if that makes sense to him. But
Yeah.
if they do go the college route, I can see Chase DeLauder being really attractive to them.
Yeah, this does seem like a pretty good draft class for what the Orioles have done previously, like you mentioned, Jim. If they're going to stick with that kind of hitting oriented in the top 5 picking, I mean, this is a fantastic draft class to be picking up top. There are a lot of bats. I think we've all mentioned each of the 3 high school hitters that have been up there. Another bat that I really like, and it feels weird, but I'm not really going out on a limb by saying some of these guys' names, but Jace Young is a guy who is just such an impressive hitter, and to have that kind of hit and power combo and still stick on the infield in some capacity. I don't know what position he's going to wind up playing best defensively, but the average, the OBP, the slug from the left side, I'm really infatuated with his bat. And then a guy who I kind of have personally been high on dating back to high school, who I don't think would get up into this number 1 range, or maybe I'd be a little bit surprised, but it's Kevin Parada. I just love this guy's hitting ability. He's a guy who, out of SoCal, every single time that I saw him personally, he hit the ball hard. He took velocity and he handled that well. He went to college at Georgia Tech, Catcher University, and has continued to hit well in the ACC. Again, we've had a number of these catchers who have defensive questions, don't really know how good they are defensively. Are they going to stick there? Are they going to need to move? I really like his bat. So those are 2 of the college guys who are still very safely in this first round consideration that I really do like.
Yeah, like Carlos mentioned, I think college catching is really, really deep this year. I think you got like 3 or 4 guys that could potentially make a push to that top 5, top 10. When you're talking like Carlos mentioned Parada, I think a couple other guys in that category are like Logan Tanner at Mississippi State, Daniel Suzak at Arizona, maybe even Hayden Dunhurst at Ole Miss. But another area I think is really, really deep that is one of the deeper classes for this demographic, since I've been doing it at least, is the high school pitching. I think you have a lot of guys in that kind of 10 to 20, 10 to 25 range right now that could absolutely skyrocket with big springs. Like I think Lesko is almost universally the number 1 high school pitcher in most people's eyes right now. But I think a guy like Jackson Ferris at IMG Academy, who outpitched Andrew Painter in a really, really big scouted game last spring, he's a guy who could kind of vault into that top 5 area. We saw Jackson Jobe go number 3 overall last year. So a lot of the prep arms, and I like Jackson Ferris a lot. And I think he's got a chance to have a really good spring.
I'm going to throw one more name out there real quick, another position player. I really like Cam Collier, who reclassified, and he can really hit. And I think if he goes to Chipola and performs as a 17-year-old, I think he could really rock it. I don't know if he'd go number 1, but I think he could really rock it up into that top 5 area because he's not just a bat-only guy. He can do some other things as well. And I think he's a guy, if he does perform at Chipola as a 17-year-old, I think he could fly up this list too.
I want to throw 2 more out then, since we're going a little bit further down the board. two shortstops, because especially coming off of last year's draft class, it was incredibly good on the high school shortstop demographic.
Yeah.
This year, it'd be hard to have 2 years back-to-back as good as last year's class. But Mikey Romero, who was insane at Jupiter. Vinyan, I know you saw him at that event. He was just unbelievable. And then I just love his hands, pure hitting ability. He's not the toolsiest player in the world, but I really like how his hands work in the box. And then Jackson Holliday, who's the son of Matt Holliday. Yeah. I think he has a chance to, in a lot of ways, similar to Drew Jones, just in the body projection that he has. I feel like he's got a chance to come out next spring, an absolute monster. There's a little bit of swing and miss that he showed this summer, but he's got power. I think he can stick at shortstop. I like the overall tool set and some of the hitting ability I've seen from him as well.
Well, I got to throw in. Go ahead, Vinny. No. I'm letting you guys wipe the whiteboard clean, and then I'll say a name.
No, I was just gonna bring up Bob Moore over at Arkansas. Been a personal favorite for a long, long time. Obviously, the son of Royals GM Dayton Moore. Really broke out in a power sense since he got to college. Switch hitter with power from both sides of the plate. Is athletic, can really move. A lot of people think he could play short. I think he could play short. It's just hard when Jalen Battles is still on campus, obviously, and they had Casey Martin there in the short in 2020 season. But a common theme I'm noticing about guys that we're talking about can rise and rise are guys that can hit. And that's becoming more and more evident. If you make a lot of contact, you put the ball in play, you have good underlying data. Like if you can hit, a lot of other seeming misgivings would be forgiven.
Yeah, it's a good year for college hitters, especially after 2021. I think most would agree it was a little bit of a down year in terms of the ability to acquire an impact college bat in the 2021 class. I've got a couple of college outfielders that I really like. We're actually so far, I don't know where Carlos, I don't know where you guys are going to come in, but we're the low site right now on Brock Jones. I think we've got him like 14 or 16 or something like that. I really like Brock Jones. I think he offers a ton. I think he offers every tool. He can really fly in center field. He might have to move to left field if he gets too much more physical, but I think it's a guy that's just really tapping into what he's capable of, having given up football, a year and a half ago. Lefty stick. He's got juice. He can run. He can throw a little bit and stick in center field. So he might be the stalwart that carries Stanford this year. And then I think another guy that, for one reason or another, gets buried on lists a little bit is Gavin Cross. Gavin Cross, you don't talk about Virginia Tech as this, mecca of producing big league baseball talent, but Cross, I mean, he's the only guy that I saw last year that barreled up Zach Maxwell twice to throw it into the gap, which is pretty incredible considering, if you step in the box against Zach Maxwell, first and foremost, you should be afraid for your life. Secondly, trying to develop a good at bat, but I think Cross, if he goes out and he hits, 330 again and he pumps out 18 to 24 home runs, that's a guy that can sneak up into the top 5 too. He's a prototype right fielder.
Yeah, no, I think when all is said and done, we might see 12, 15 college hitters taken in the first round. It's, I think one of probably the deepest college hitting classes we've seen in a while. And I think that's a big reason why I think teams have been, I'm not saying this is a classic, 2005, 2011 draft, but teams have been pretty excited about this draft since the summer, just because there's a lot of college, and there's a lot of high school position players too. The flip side is there really aren't that many healthy college pitchers right now who are, jumping out as obvious first round picks. But I think people are in general, fairly optimistic about the draft because of all those college bats.
Yeah, 100%. What do you guys think of, this is kind of an off the wall question. What do you guys think of some of the lineage in this draft, the Holidays and the Drew Jones and,
when Jim was talking about the depth of this draft class, I actually wanted to ask him if he remembered a draft class that had this many impact bloodlines.
No,
because in my time, it's much shorter than you, Jim, but there's not been a class that has this many impact bloodlines players at all. It's not even.
I'm just looking at our list. Number one, Drew Jones is number one. He's Andrew's son. Number 3 is Elijah Green. His dad was an all-pro tight end or a Pro Bowl tight end. Number 5 is Brooks Lee. His dad's his college coach. Number 6 is Jace Young. He's Josh's brother. Number 11, we talked about Robert Moore's Dayton's son. That's 5 or 6 of the top 11 players right there. And that's not even counting, the Holidays and some of the guys, Cam
Collier, Mark McGuire,
Daniel Suzak,
CC Sabathia's kid.
Sabathia,
yeah.
It's a ton.
Yeah, Kumar Rocker's back again. His dad played in the NFL. We've got him again. So you can go. It's just a ton. But no, especially if you're just starting from the top, I don't think I can remember this many guys. From the top. Tucker Toman, his dad's been a college coach forever. I remember when his dad. This was many years ago when his dad was.
Locklear's dad is at VCU.
Yeah, there you go. But I remember when I started at Baseball America. Tucker Toman's dad was Ray Tanner's, top assistant at NC State. That's how long that's been. So yeah, there's just a ton of these guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. What do you guys think about Kumar Rocker and Judd Fabian and some of these guys coming back for a second year?
Kumar. I think it comes down to, what's the medical report look like?
Yeah.
I don't know. On Fabian, I get it when you think you're going to get X from a specific team and then you don't make it that team and you don't get offered. It's just double-edged sword. I hear it from both sides. The player side's like, look, Orioles were going to pay us $3 million if he got to 42, but then I get the Red Sox perspective of, well, you didn't get to 42, and this is what we're offering you. And it wasn't like they offered him, 1.5 or something, but so Kumar didn't really have a choice. So we'll see how that one plays out. But with Fabian. I'll be honest. I mean, I would have probably signed for what the Red Sox were offering because it's.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's taking a gamble. Now, I don't mind him betting on himself. I like it when players bet on themselves. But I mean, we all followed Judd Fabian last year, and he was not good early. And then he was great for 6 weeks, and he made the 2-strike adjustment. And everybody was all jacked up, and he was rising boards. And then he wasn't very good the final 3 weeks of the season again. And if he comes out, I mean, the guy's never hit 300 in college. If he comes out and struggles at all, then I don't think he's going to get what the Red Sox offered him. Although, like I said, I had no problem with the guy betting on himself. Like I do respect that.
Yeah, I didn't think that Matt McLean would have done better for himself coming out of high school, getting taken in the back of the first round, and he did better for himself. So kind of like Jim was saying, you can't really knock a kid for betting on himself. But at the same time, just looking at the kind of class dynamics, last year was not a good college hitting class. This year is, like Jim was saying, one of the deepest ones we've seen in recent years. So it is going to be tougher. He's not only going to have to improve, he's going to have to stand out among a lot more competitors than he had a year ago. So it'll be interesting. He is a premium defender, which helps. There are a lot of corner defenders in this class, but I think you have a lot more confidence in a lot of those other bats in the 2022 class.
Yeah, like Jim said, though, it's important to note that Kumar Rocker and Judd Fabian, two very different scenarios there. Like Rocker didn't really have a choice in the matter. Mm-hmm. If he comes, it's a lot easier, I think, for Rocker to come back and recoup his value, show he's healthy, he pitches well wherever he ends up pitching. Whereas Judd he's got to make that little incremental jump, and that little incremental from where he's at to get to, I think, where he wants to be is probably might be a little bit further of a gap. Like Jim said, he never hit 300 in college, and he still finished, I think, with 20 or 21 home runs last year. So like the power's there. It's just the strikeout rate early was just bad, and he made the adjustment as the season went on. But it'll be interesting for sure. Obviously, Judd gets a chance to come back. He enrolled early when he got to college, so he'll be right around average age for a college player now, and he gets to play a year with his younger brother Derek. So that's
pretty cool.
Too.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty cool. Hey, really quickly, anecdotally on Kumar Rocker, back in I think it was 2004, I want to say, Luke Hochevar turned down pretty big money, went the independent training route, became the number 1 pick overall for the Royals the following year. Any of you guys given Rocker a chance with some of the medicals and things like that to come back and vault his way into that top 1, 2, 3?
Well, one, not to knock the Royals for taking Luke Hochevar, that pick made no sense at the time. Like, like it just didn't. It did. I mean, so kudos to Luke Hochevar. He got paid, but like, I think the industry was kind of stunned that happened. I think it's gonna be tough with Kumar just because of the medical. Again, I haven't seen the medical. I've heard like 18 different things about what went wrong with the Mets, what they didn't like. Steve Cohen piled on, hey, I know investments and the draft's a great investment. And we would walk anyway. So they obviously didn't like what they saw. So I think it's going to be tougher for him because, the Mets, they had a deal. I think it was $6 million, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I think
big money.
I think it's going to be tough for Kumar to get $6 million. I mean, you never say never, but like, the medicals would have to be pretty pristine for him to get $6 million, and I can't imagine they're pristine. But
short of him coming back and finding a way to throw 4 or 5 inning outings in independent ball and suddenly being a guy that's 99, I'm with you, Jim. I don't see it happening. What, either of you guys see it?
I feel like it's just so hard for me to say because I really do feel like most of it is just tied up to the medical and whatever he does, like stuff wise. I don't think anyone questions his stuff when he's on the mound. I guess he did have the velocity dip, but I was never too concerned about Kumar's stuff. So I think it's just basically tied into that medical situation, and I really have no good information to give anyone on that. So we'll just see what happens.
It was also like 35 degrees in Missouri that night.
Yeah,
so
I do think it also is worth noting, like the teams have a pretty good track record. When this happens, the teams, you generally would want the team side of the decision. It seems like people are making the right calls on these medical controversy, no pick or no signing picks. Just in recent memory, Jim, maybe you can point to some that have worked out.
Brady Singer's one that I think went the other way, where the Blue Jays, when they were failing everybody on physicals left and right, failed
They
him,
seem
and he
pretty
came back.
aggressive.
But yeah, it's just tough because again, I'm with Carlos too. Like I know his stuff fluctuated last year, although I just think he was under the microscope so much because like most pitchers' stuff fluctuates. I mean, Jack Leiter's stuff fluctuated for 3 weeks in the middle of the season too, and I
Big
just
time.
think Kumar had this almost impossible standard to live up to. So I don't think teams are so much worried about that. It's just, are we talking? And again, I'm just speculating because I don't know. Like, if does he need Tommy John surgery? I think everybody would feel pretty good about him coming back from Tommy John surgery. But is it, what if he has a labrum tear? And again, I don't know. I'm just making things up. Then it's a totally different thing. Or who knows? Like, again, nobody knows exactly what's going on. Now I do think if he were somehow the health thing was cleared up, which again, that would seem pretty strange to me that the Mets just said, no, we're not offering him anything. We want no part of Kumar Rocker. And then a year from now, everybody be like, oh, he's good. Like we're fine with him. But like if the medical was fine, then I think he would get. I mean, if you could tell me that Kumar was healthy, which again, none of us have any idea, but if you tell me Kumar is 100% healthy, he'd be in the running going number 1 in the draft. I mean, because there's no college pitching in this draft. I mean, he'd be an easy top 5 pick,
Very
I
true.
think. But again, I don't think that's realistic to say he's 100% healthy.
Yeah, it's one of those, right, where, like Jim said, we've heard a million different things from a million different people about whether it be speculative or like sourced info about what's exactly is in the medical. The truth is we don't really know. But it's also important to note that like each team has their own medical process. It's not a like standardized MLB. This is kind of what we're looking for. The Mets are looking for these check marks or these flags, and the Mets decided that they didn't like it. Whereas, like it maybe if somebody else took him, maybe the Orioles took him, the Orioles say, yeah, we're fine with it, and here's your money, and they signed Kumar Rocker, and he's on the Orioles top 30 list now. It's one of those. It's a team by team basis, but like I think both Jim and Carlos said, I would be shocked if it was kind of it's a pristine medical and he's back in the top 5 running.
Yeah. Well, let's jump to the topic that this entire thing was kind of about. Got a question the other day from one of our readers, just wondering how the hell any of us build boards. There's so much information in those boards. They're so subjective. There's a million different players in these boards. How do we rank? How do we do the entire process? So I wanted to just kind of open it up to you guys and give you an opportunity to just, how do you weight your boards? Is it personal live looks? Is it scouting execs opinions? Is it data that you get? Is it synergy, film study? Kind of how do you weigh your boards and how do you produce them? Carlos, I think let's start with you, man.
Yeah. Well, no, it's pretty easy, or at least broadly, to answer this question. It's fairly easy for me because fortunately, I think definitely from my perspective, my board really doesn't take into account my opinions on players. We're at Baseball America trying to best reflect the industry's consensus on the talent. That's just kind of how BA did it before I got here. So I kind of inherited the way we go about things from some guys before me, Hudson Belinsky, Clint Longnecker, obviously Jim was at BA and doing this for a long time before I ever got there. So basically my process boiled down is trying to talk to as many scouts as I can about the class, to have a lot of conversations with a lot of scouts at various levels, to try and see how the industry as a whole on consensus would line up the talent. That's the goal every year. So really the challenge is just reporting. Obviously I like to put eyes on these players. It helps the entire process if I have a feel for players and I can kind of dig deeper and ask better questions by understanding the players themselves. But at the end of the day, if I like Drew Jones, but every single person, I want to use Drew because you guys have Drew at the top, Jim. If I like Dylan Lesko as the best player in the class and everyone comes back to me and says, no, we think Drew Jones is the consensus top player in this class right now, it's going to be Drew Jones at the top of the list of the BA board. It's not going to be whoever I like. So generally speaking, that's how we go about approaching the board. And we can maybe get into some details later on about kind of how specifically we do that. But that's the overall process and the goal for us at Baseball America.
And we kind of do the same thing. I mean, I came from doing that. That's how Alan Simpson started the draft coverage back in 1981. And, we always like seeing players and like Carlos said, and have an idea what you're looking at. But at the same time, what he said is exactly true. Like if let's say like I mentioned Chase Delauder earlier, and let's say I was like, oh, Chase Delauder, he's got to be number one. If the industry is saying no, Drew Jones, Termarr Johnson, then those guys are going to be at the top of the list. So we pretty much do it the exact same way that Carlos was describing. There's fewer of us. I mean, I don't know how many different people, Carlos, you guys have involved in draft coverage. When I was there, it was about 5 or 6 of us would divide up the country like into different.
I'd say it's similar numbers still, Jim. Yeah.
Yeah. I know, like I'm sure like I did, Carl, you probably had, it's not like everybody has 1/6 of the country. Like I had, I think 40% of the country at one point. But like, for at MLB.com, it's Jonathan Mayo and I. So we split the country in half. We don't have to go 500 deep like Carlos does. And Vinny, I think you guys have even gone 600 deep. We don't, we've gone, we go to 250. So it's a little more manageable with 2 people. But like we'll split the country, and then I won't get into all the details of how the sausage is made, but essentially we'll rank the guys. We'll kind of sort them by round. Like we'll go top of the first round, bottom half of the first round, then second, third, fourth, and so on, however deep. I think when we go 250, we get down into the 8th round just to kind of roughly sort them out. And then we'll mash our list together, and then we'll send it back out to the industry and get a bunch of feedback. And, we'll get, sometimes say, hey, like 4 guys tell us this guy's too high or that guy's too low. We'll switch guys around, but it's kind of the same thing.
I kind of knew that this was generally the process, Jim, but it is funny like hearing you talk about it, because I do think, and we can talk about like the pros and cons of different lists. And I think it is a benefit that there are a lot of different ways that people make their lists, but every time all the draft lists come out, I do feel like y'all's list is most similar to ours, just kind of as I eyeball it and scan down.
Yeah, because
it makes sense because we have the exact same process. Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah, we have obviously a slightly different process. So it's myself and Brian Sikowski who kind of head up all of the draft coverage, and obviously we have in recent years PG's expanded their regional scouts and that sort of stuff, and I also head up the college stuff for PG, so that makes it kind of a nice little flow. But we kind of try to thread the needle between our own personal evaluations and live looks, along with what Carlos and Jim were talking about, which is the industry consensus. And so we have our database, and we have a ton of players in there, obviously, and we'll just kind of sort through. And the way we work it out is we'll kind of reach out to all of our various contacts across the country, whether it be guys who work for us, guys who scout for us, and I know go to see games and that sort of stuff, versus also industry sources on the other side, right? Area scouts, cross checkers, higher than that, national level guys, even higher than that sometimes. And we'll try to make a blend kind of both. What Brian says all the time, and I think is something that I think we both believe in, is that we want these lists to hold up 5 years after the draft instead of the day of the draft. And we'll do a mock draft the day of the draft too, like everybody. We're trying to get it right in an accurate sense, but also we're also trying to say, you know what, we have seen this guy a lot. We like this guy a little bit better than what the industry is telling us, and we'll do that, and vice versa sometimes. But obviously, we want to make sure the names are in the right places. We want to get them in the right slotting areas. But if we have the opportunity to have seen a guy a lot of the times and feel strongly about where that guy should be on a draft list, I think we'll make that decision on our board.
Yeah, I think, Vinny, at Prospects Live, we're kind of in the same boat in terms of threading the needle. I mean, we've got guys getting live
an impossible needle to thread, by the way.
It is. I mean, what was the mock draft winner last year? I know Cespedes Family Barbecue did like a mock draft leaderboard, and I think someone got 6 out of 30 or something like that. I mean, it's a pretty futile
like 6
exercise.
or 7, yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, you can talk to these executives and scouts as much as you want, but in a lot of cases, especially as you get closer to the draft, they're gonna point your nose in a different direction when where they want to go. But in terms of the way that we do our boards at Prospects Lives, at least, it's a lot of live looks. It's a lot of the video and film study. But I think one thing that we like to kind of iron into ours is just projecting what a player is going to look like to the analyst side of things, with some of the data, with some of the TrackMan data. Just, maybe it's a guy that the industry has going in the 3rd round. We like to kind of identify those guys in the 3rd round that have huge, outlier type data, and see, maybe Cleveland would jump on him in the 2nd round, type of things like that. So, but yeah, and then obviously talking to area scouts, talking to supervisors and cross checkers, and as high as you can go is a huge part of it as well. But Yeah, it's different for everyone. I mean, everyone makes the Thanksgiving turkey a little bit differently. Jim, what's your favorite part about building out the board around this time of year?
I think just kind of getting started on the next year's draft, to be honest. I mean, we're doing so many different things. I mean, you guys do, everybody does. I mean, you got a different prospect lists that aren't draft related in the fall league and things going on. And now the draft's later, a month later than we're used to. So that's dragging into the summer and affecting all kinds of other stuffs.
We could talk for a while about this new schedule.
Yeah. Nobody wants to hear us complain about that. But I was going to say, so like to me, like, so we'll do, like, I think Jonathan this year was September. We'll do kind of an end of summer, top 20 college, top 20 high school, like quick list. But it's cool because, again, like I'll go into the process with a fall list and names and hear guys. And you always find about guys you didn't know that much about, or you find out about guys that are even better than you think. Or even like I'll just throw out an example. Like, look, I knew Termarr Johnson was good. Like, we all knew Termarr Johnson was good. But it's still cool. I was talking to a scout who compared him to a combination of Wade Boggs' plate discipline and Vladimir Guerrero Sr.'s bat to ball skills. And I was like, I've never had a double Hall of Fame comp before. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, and so like, I mean, look, I knew he was really good, but I guess I hadn't really like started to put him in perspective. And we'll probably do a story at some point, but like, he's the best high school hitter since when? Like, I can't even come up with who the last guy I would say was a better high school hitter than him. I don't know. Like, and so you realize some of the guys who are really good, you're like, you find out are even maybe better than you thought. And you come up with some names you weren't necessarily that on top of. So it's just, I think kind of getting, like we didn't have him at the very top of our board. Like Nolan McLean was a guy I really liked coming out of high school a couple of years ago. And he kind of got everybody excited this fall. Like, he's got to make contact, but he's a pretty interesting guy, like there's a million guys like that, so it's just, it's interesting to me to find out, okay, like, let's start lining these guys up. We still have, I guess 7 months, right? Like, to figure out where they go, but like, let's get started. This, like, it's fun. I always like, I mean, it goes back to my Baseball America days. I like trying to figure out who's going to go where and who's better than who, and just even having that discussion with Jonathan. Again, it's not 6 of us, it's 2 of us, but like, okay, player A versus player B, who's better and why, and I love doing that.
Yeah, I think it's. So I'm sorry, Carlos. You can go ahead.
No, that was me, Vinny. Go ahead.
Oh, Joe, I cut you off. That's fine. Then I'm no problem cutting you off. Yeah. I agree with you. I think a really fun part of doing this for me is like, all right, we're gonna be high on this guy. Zach and I are both really like him. The guys who have seen him the most agree with us. Let's put where are we at now? We have him here at 51. Okay, that's a good spot. And then as we're going through and sourcing it out, and like something we do too, like Jim said, is we'll send out rough draft 1, rough draft 2, rough draft 3. Like, the final iteration of the list has gone through 4, 5, 6 different adjustments at times. And the feedback we get every time is like, no, he's still too low at 51. And we're like, oh, so we're talking like borderline first round guy. And I think that's a really cool part of it for me, is like guys that are good that maybe you didn't realize how much teams liked him, or guys that we have far too low in our initial rough draft list that it's like, no, this is a guy that is a top 3 round guy versus a guy that we had kind of in the 6 to 8 range and that sort of stuff. And Jim, obviously, I have nowhere near the history of the draft that you guys do, but it feels I'll throw out a guess for last great high school hitter since Termarr, and I'll say Joe Mauer.
Yeah, it's funny that would be the name. Like, I'm sure we'll probably try to attempt that. I love doing the draft history stories.
Yeah.
But like, the thing is, like, it's so different because that was 2001. I mean, that was literally 20 years ago, and you didn't have all these events, and the internet did exist, but you didn't have nearly the amount of video, and people don't remember that. Like, that was like the Mark Teixeira draft. And,
oh, wow.
And because Joe Mauer was from Minnesota, like, even though, he was a name because he was this Florida State quarterback recruit, like, a lot of people, I think, at the time just kind of assumed, oh, the Twins are being cheap. They're not taking one of the $10 million guys. And I actually, like, if you were quantifying somehow hype that the guy got at the time, it's not even close. Like, nobody was saying Joe Mauer is this unbelievable hitter. It was just like, oh, he's this really athletic catcher and he plays quarterback. But like, yeah, he's probably the best. And that's going back that's going back 20 drafts right there.
Yeah.
Is the Bryce Harper Termarr Johnson? I know that he went to Southern
It's just
Nevada.
different. It's just, and
Yeah.
Bryce was more power over hit. Like, we're just talking about pure hitting ability. Like, I don't know. Like, I haven't heard people talk as reverentially about a player's, high school player's ability to put the bat on the ball and make great contact like Termarr. It's just crazy. Now, Bryce would be. It's funny. John Manuel and I argue about this, Carlos. He'd probably, if he listens to this, he'll argue with me again. I think Bryce Harper is the best power hitting prospect in the 30 plus years that I've covered this stuff. And he'll throw out Bo Jackson. And I'm like,
Okay.
Bo had great raw, but like Bryce Harper was such a better hitter than Bo Jackson was at age 17, 18 years old that their raw power was probably comparable, but like Bryce Harper's power had to be much, like a full grade more usable.
Mm-hmm.
So like if John Manuel's listening, I still dismiss his argument. So like Bryce Harper would be the best power prospect I've ever seen or talked to people about. But man, Termarr is a high school hitter. Like, I mean, you guys hear the same thing, right? I mean, guys just.
Yeah, and you can't even shortchange his power either. I mean, Termarr Johnson is going to hit for power too.
I mean, and we're talking about a guy who's probably a second baseman. So we're talking about a high school second base. I mean, he maybe not, but like
I think Termarr has to be one of the more unique top of the class players, certainly that I've ever seen. Like you're saying, Jim, I mean, he's easily the best high school hitter that I've ever seen. It's a shorter period, but the way he's able to move the bat around like a toothpick in his hands and still have lightning in the bat as well. It's like electric back speed. Easy power. I mean, he showed easier power at Perfect Games National batting practice than Elijah Green did in batting practice. I did not expect that at the time. Like, I knew going in that Termarr was an incredibly advanced hitter, pure hitter, but the power did surprise me the first time I saw him. And yeah, he's just at another level. I think prior to this, the best like pure hitters that I'd seen would be Jared Kelenic, Riley Green, Corbin Carroll, maybe.
All good ones, but not
but Termarr is in another league just in terms of the guys that I've seen in person. It's scary how good he's able to manipulate the barrel, his approach, just everything that you would want to see from a hitter in the box. It's really impressive. And he looks so different than what you would expect a top of the class high school player, because there are some concerns on the body. There are some profile concerns, but I don't know. For me, when you got a bat that good, I don't really care too much.
Carlos, I was just going to say that's the thing that's crazy about it is I think the consensus, I mean, it's not a lot, but the consensus I think among most, if you surveyed everybody, is that he probably winds up at second base. And just the fact that we're talking about a high school second baseman could be a very easy choice to take 1-1 is like, whoever would have thought that? Like, I was trying to think, but like the like high school second baseman, I think of Forrest Wall. Like he was a sandwich pick.
Nick York now.
Yeah. Nick York was a signability guy. I mean, I can't even imagine a high school second baseman was ever. I can never remember anyone being close to going 1-1.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. The only thing that I keep hearing, it's the same thing that you guys keep hearing, is this kid is so unbelievably talented, but at least executives are struggling with just the precedent of it. Someone his size at the top of the draft. I've had, if we're talking about comparisons, I've had one executive come to me and say, is he Willie Calhoun or Shed Long, or is he Joe Morgan? Like, he's probably going to end up closer to the Joe Morgan side of things with his bat skills than the other two, which is incredible to me that a guy is being thrown around in the same conversation as Joe Morgan.
The greatest second baseman of all time.
Right. But the similar stature, just an incredible hitter that, might not fill up a physical sheet, but just gets it done. I love the, I guess, ironing out of Termarr Johnson. I just think it's going to be fascinating to watch over the next 7 months. Vinny, you've seen him quite a few times.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, like I said earlier, when we were kind of talking about dark horse number 1 picks, like if you could hit, like the rest of the conversation is almost a degree of, does anybody really care? If you can't do, if you can't run or, can't play a premium defensive position. I don't know. We do, obviously, we cover these kids from, when they're young all the way through their high school, and then in college level when they start getting back to the draft and everything. And I remember Termarr Johnson was I believe he was the 2022 class's inaugural number 1 player, or number 2, maybe behind Dylan Lesko, whatever the case may be. And like, I hadn't seen him live yet, and I saw him, and I'm like, oh, the undersized left-handed hitting shortstop. Like, this is the guy that we're going to pump near the top of the class. And then he goes backside double off the left center field wall at the East Cobb Complex. I'm like, oh, nobody told me he had that kind of juice. And so you look at kind of the completeness of the bat. And not only that, I think what's a really, really big part of it too is just the makeup and the energy that he has. He is so confident on the field, and he is so locked in at all moments of the time. He's just so much fun to watch. Like, when he was he won our home run derby at Petco at the PG All-American game, and every single person on the sideline was cheering for Termarr Johnson. Like, he's electric. He grabs the attention of everybody in the room, and he is without a doubt a superstar on the field. And he's so much fun to watch.
We've had a lot of guys tell us that Termarr is easily, far and away, not even close, the biggest trash talker in this class, but in the best ways. In the best way. Like Gary Payton, I respect you, but I'm going to make it hurt.
No, man, I heard a story of him and a couple other guys hanging out at like PDP last summer, and they weren't playing in the game, but they were hanging out in the dugout. They had towels over their heads, and they're just like jawing with the other team, and it's all fun and everything. But he's awesome.
Yeah. I actually at Petco, he told, I'm trying to remember who the name of the first baseman was, but he got a single, and he looked at the first baseman, and he goes, "How you doing? You having a good day?" "Oh, scoreboard doesn't look like you're having a good day." that was the no hitter that I think the East squad threw. So yeah, Termarr, he's going to be fun to watch. Let's end it on this. We're going on about 45 minutes. I don't want to keep you guys too long. Last question: What's the one thing you're looking forward to most this spring? Whether it be a player's development, something like that.
Yes, something I think Jim has touched on a couple times earlier today. I'm excited to see who breaks out of this college pitching class. I think there's a lot of guys in a lot of similar spots right now. I think the top guy we have on our board is Peyton Pallette right now, but and he's a guy at Arkansas who missed a lot of time last season with injury, so we don't know kind of what the guy's kind of consensus near top of the college draft boards as far as pitchers goes. You talk about him, you're talking about Blade Tidwell, who's an eligible sophomore, his second year. Can he make that jump? A guy like Bryce Hubbard or Parker Messick at Florida State, kind of polar opposites there. Messick is the ACC pitcher of the year and is coming back for a third year where he'll probably dominate again, albeit with less stuff per se than Hubbard, whereas Hubbard never really had sustained success, but broke out in a big way over the summer. A lot of guys with kind of USA pedigrees, you get a little bit further down, you see guys like Gabe Hughes at Gonzaga, that could be a breakout. Just a ton of options there on the collegiate pitching side of things that I'm excited to see kind of who goes out and establishes themselves. So if you're talking about a demographic that's going to go often in the first round, if you look at the history of the MLB draft, especially in recent years, it's college pitching.
It's funny, Vinny, because I was going to say something similar. I will change my answer, but I was also going to say it's so confusing because you have Connor Prelip, who's probably not going to – I don't think he's going to pitch at Alabama this spring.
He might be the biggest wild card.
He's a wild card.
He was my favorite arm coming into the draft. He's not going to throw.
If he's healthy, he'd be in the running to go number one. And then you have Landon Sims, who's going to make the transition from like lights out multi-inning closer on the national championship club to a starter. So there's lots of interesting things that way. To me – I'm just going to say the overall race for number one. While, as good as Termarr is, and we were just talking about how great he is, I just think this number one pick is pretty wide open. I mean, you have Termarr, who might be the best high school hitter in a long time. You have Drew Jones, who has a higher ceiling than Termarr. You have Elijah Green, who has a higher ceiling than both of them. Becomes with risk. You've got some of those college hitters we talked about. I don't even think we mentioned Jacob Berry, who I got like a switch hitting Andrew Vaughn comparison. I don't know where he's going to wind up. Brooks Lee, we only touched on briefly, and Brooks Lee's another infielder like Jace Young, who maybe he doesn't stick at shortstop, but he probably sticks on the dirt. He can really hit, and he's got power. And you have all those outfilders, and I mean it's going to be. I just think it's going to be fun to watch who's number one. This could be one of those years that every time we update our list, maybe the number one pick, the number one guy on our list is a little bit different. And I would expect that the mocks will be, ever changing. So I'm looking forward to that kind of, wide open. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think those are both good ones. I think I'm kind of going to go with the college bat group because I do think there are a lot of really good college hitters. I'm curious to see if during this spring season we will get any confidence in the order of these hitters. Does anyone kind of establish themselves as the clear-cut top bat in the class? Because I think right now there's a handful that you could kind of make a case for depending on your preferences or who you like or the scouts that you talk to. So I'm curious about that. I'm also curious to see if Dylan Lesko hangs on to the number 1 high school pitcher tag in the class, because last year, I think going into the year, I would have felt pretty confident that Andrew Painter would have kind of held on to that. He checked all the boxes, was really good during the summer. But there are a lot of really interesting arms in this high school class. A guy like Brock Porter is really impressive. He's exciting. So does Lesko hang on to this tag as the top prep arm in the class? I think he's held this, like, going back, I don't know, Vinny, you would know better than me how long he's been kind of looked at as the top pitcher in this 2022 class, but it feels like it's been a long time. I mean, his high school numbers are insane. His travelable numbers are insane. And I'm also always a sucker for the high school shortstops. And in a group that is not great, I'm curious to see if a guy like Cole Young is going to kind of just be the de facto top guy, or if we're going to have someone like a Jackson Holiday maybe, or a Mikey Romero, who I like. Are they going to shoot up the board and claim that title as the top prep shortstop? Because that's a demographic that traditionally pans out pretty well and is one that I always get excited for. So is anyone in that group going to kind of claim the throne there?
Yeah, and it's just especially interesting looking back at kind of last year's draft with all those prep shortstops that kind of flew off the board in the middle of the late first round. Interesting to see how they'll do there. But no, I'm really high on Dylan Lesko too. I think I think he's going to be a superstar. The high school pitching class is really, really deep. It's interesting to see kind of how many of those guys will end up going in the first round. Traditionally, not a ton, but man, I'm very impartial to Dylan Lesko. I think he's got a lot of. He reminds me a lot of Zach Greinke on the mound. Just both in the stuff and both in his aptitude and kind of knowledge of pitching.
I'm really intrigued with the college shortstop crop, because I think there's a huge variance in how high some of these guys could go, or whether or not we get another class like 2020 where you start seeing some guys come off the board in the comp round because college shortstops generally do well. It's a peculiar class because Zach Neto out of Campbell has a ton of physical tools. He's not a sublime defender, but he's got a quirky swing and a quirky stance and a loading mechanism that turns off some different evaluators. And Eric Brown at Coastal Carolina is the exact same way, really quirky. It's going to turn some people off. Carter Young, I think, is a really interesting name that is a really strong defender up the middle that should stick at the position. Is he going to be able to remain healthy and cut down on the strikeouts? Ryan Ritter is another guy that Perfect Game really loves. Is he going to tap into more power? I just think it's a position group with some names that have room to move up, but also they have a lot to prove too, and they're just quirky profiles. So that's kind of where my eyes are. That and Noah Schultz, man. I hope Noah Schultz starts. I hope he comes out and dots a couple sixes, because that would be fun. Sixes and sevens. So, well, guys, hey, it's been a pleasure. I definitely think this would be cool to continue doing, maybe once every few months, catching up with each other, seeing how everyone's doing. But yeah, if this is it, have a good holidays, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for listening.